Hey everybody, welcome to another video review. So this is the other Walt Disney Classics Collection fine art porcelain statue with a father and daughter theme. This is the second one, but the more not famous, but the more, I guess, rare, the more rare and the more desired piece in general. So this is, of course, from Mulan. It depicts the scene from the movie, near the end of the movie, where she, has that heart-to-heart talk with her father under the cherry blossom tree. The name of the sculpture references that. It references a line he says to her, comparing her, to the cherry blossom. So the title is, when it blooms, it will be the most beautiful of all, which is honestly, it's like one of the most like awkward names for a statue that I've ever heard, but it's made up for by the fact that the line, of course, of dialogue that inspired it, it's just so amazing. And believe it or not, it actually, is on the base. It actually says when it blooms, it will be the most beautiful of all. This was made to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the movie, and it was released in 2008. So it was released about 4 years after the King Triton and Ariel gold circle, piece. And on the bottom of the base, it does show the 10th anniversary. It has like in gold 10th anniversary. And so again, when Walt Disney Classics Collection pieces are released to commemorate various anniversaries, they tend to be a bit more special, a bit more limited, a bit more ambitious. And it's no different with this piece. They only released a limited number, 500 total was the limitation. So you can imagine almost 25%, essentially almost 25% of the Triton Ariel piece, Morning Daddy. That one was 1,989 to commemorate the year that Little Mermaid was released. I'm sure that many people wish that they had made 2,000 and that they had made 1,998 of this porcelain statue, which was when Mulan was released in 1998. So I'm going to start twirling the statue around. 500 for a Disney piece is very, very limited indeed, very, very difficult to find, especially when it's from a movie, as beloved as Mulan, and among the Asian population, a lot of Asians really love Disney. This may not be an obvious fact, but remember that of all of the Disney parks out there, you have 3 of them in a cluster in Asia. You have one in Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. And so that, speaks to, again, the popularity of Disney in Asia. And then, of course, one of the more beloved animated classics now is Mulan, dealing with one of China's most beloved heroine, one of their greatest folk tales. So there's a lot of setup for demand for this piece, and of course at 500, it just has driven the market value of this piece through the roof, essentially. So as usual, before getting into the piece itself, I'll give a little backstory about it. So I had always looked at this piece and really loved it. I really wanted it, but at the time I really was trying to focus my collecting on just Beauty and the Beast. For those of you who may not know, the Walt Disney Classics Collection, if you were to include every piece released, it numbers well into the hundreds. Okay, I'm thinking 400 or 500 plus pieces, quite a lot. And, I simply didn't have the room to be able to do that. And nor was I at a time in my life where financially that would have been reasonable. And so I'm a very, very big Beauty and the Beast fan. I've made a couple of Walt Disney Classics collection videos of Beauty and the Beast, but I do have all of those. And so I felt that the best thing to do was just to simply focus all of my attention and my resources on just Beauty and the Beast from the Walt Disney Classics collection line. And so regretfully, I passed on a lot of these other pieces that had, very, very high artistic merit, but which I just felt was too slippery a slope. And of course, later on, as I got older, I did change my mind, and I have been buying various pieces which I felt was really, deserving of my time and attention to be put in my collection. Some of the signature edition pieces which I've done video reviews for, of course, are no-brainers. Things like, Soups On or Off to the Ball. And, other little ones that I've done where, like, for whatever reason, I just really like the subject matter. I like the sort of the feeling of the emotion, that it brings up in me. I bought, for instance, the Two Little Boos from Monsters, Inc. because it reminded them of my daughters. And so this was definitely on my radar very quickly after I decided to expand my criteria, my supposed criteria for buying WDCC. And at the time, the prices for these were beginning to go up, but still not crazy. But any WDCC piece with, I think, a limitation that's less than 1,000, they hold value pretty well, okay? And because they're so rare, and anything 750 and below tends to be very desirable, whatever the subject matter, and pretty difficult to get. And if you're talking about pieces in the 500 range, they all have pretty high likelihood of becoming grails in the Walt Disney Classics collection line if you're trying to get them. And so this is no exception at only 500. Now, a couple things. My personal history is, when I first had an opportunity to get this, of course, I was going by market value at the time. I didn't want to spend too much. And I wound up finally buying a version of this on eBay many, many, many years ago. I would say probably close to 10 years ago, actually. I bought one of these guys for around $800. Okay, $800 on eBay. And, therein sort of lies the tragedy in the sense that one of the reasons that this piece is also desired is that there's probably not 500 of these out there, because it's very fragile, right? Take a look at the tree. Zhou and Mulan are not actually fragile. They're very good. They're just sitting there. But that tree is really, really fragile. And it gets broken pretty darn easily during shipping because of just contact and impact damage, right? And so knowing this, I had talked to the seller, and she's decided to just basically bring the piece to I think UPS and just have it done professionally. In case you guys don't know, UPS and Federal Express offer these types of professional packing, and they charge a nominal fee. It's not like a very high fee for most things, but they charge the fee. And the advantage of taking them up on it is that, of course, if anything should go wrong, it's like no questions asked. They instantly reimburse you the full amount of the insurance because obviously, what can they say? They're the ones who literally package the whole thing. And most of the time, they actually do know what they're doing. But my caveat is that I think you need to understand that you're kidding yourself if you think some random, Joe Schmo or Jane Schmo working or who owns a local UPS store is some sort of like a museum curator or master packer. They're not. They're usually actually, in my opinion, pretty ignorant about these things. and they just do the best they can. And a lot of times, they're just there to kind of add some extra peanuts and that type of thing. They're not by any stretch of the imagination experts in packaging really, really rare things. They don't work for Sotheby's or something stupid like that. Okay, so and sometimes you have to take charge. You have to be in there, kind of with them, helping them, giving them information, crafting the best possible, box. I mean, for really, really rare statues like this, it's not something that's like a formula. You really have to kind of think about what you're going to do and what you're trying to achieve. And so in reality, Walt Disney Classics Collection dealers, for instance, or people who, sell these, buy these for a living, are probably much more adept at safely packing them, especially a piece without a box, than your professional UPS or Federal Express person. And the reason I mentioned this is because, the person who sold this to me, see, you can tell how horrible this is. Like, I still remember every stinking detail from like a decade ago. So this person actually took this piece to UPS and they packaged it. By the way, it had full packaging. It had like, the original box, the original package, the green box, everything. Okay. And so what this person at UPS did, this so-called professional professional there, is that they put it in the original box, and then they also like basically put bubble wrap all around the leaves of the cherry blossoms for just extra padding. And you would think that would be good, but to make a long story short, it came to me with multiple branches, especially of the cherry blossom, like the leaves and stuff. Multiple of those branches were basically broken. Okay, and so that was definitely a tragedy, very, very difficult to sort of bear, because that was really tough. And so we went through the insurance process, and at the time, I asked for essentially, I think, a refund of about $400 to $500. Okay, that's what I requested, and that's what was going to be needed to try to professionally restore that Mulan and Fazal. And I had gotten like a quote from a professional near where I lived. I could hand deliver, have that person repair this. But at that point, once we got through the claims process, UPS, the adjuster, then said, well, if you want that much money, then you would have to send the statue back, because at that point, the cost of the repair would be well over half the actual value of the statue, right? Because I bought it for, I think, $800. And when it's, when you're asking for over $400 reimbursement, that was their thinking. And what I should have done would have been to argue that, this piece is priceless, and that sometimes the repair to properly, professionally restore it to its original form could be even more expensive than the original price, and that I could not return something like this. Because like a lot of times what you do is when it gets returned, they destroy it. And I don't know what the policy is now, whether you're supposed to send it back to the original seller, but that's different policy. I mean, eBay will ask you to send the piece back to the original seller, to the seller, if you want your money back, if you file a claim through either eBay or PayPal. But in this case, I was filing a claim through UPS. I didn't ask for my money back, and UPS was to give them the statue, and they normally destroy them, to tell you the truth. And so at that time, I just said, I just wanted to wash my hands of the matter. I didn't want to really argue, because, to me, at least, I wasn't that enthusiastic about it anyway, mainly because, it was broken and I would have had to restore it. But the bottom line is that I just said, fine. So I just said, give me my entire money back then. I don't want to have a partial refund. I'll just, here, you take the statue, get my money back. So UPS did actually reimburse the full price of the statue. And then, I got my money back, and they took the the statue, and for all I know, and most likely they destroyed it. And at that point, because this thing didn't grow on trees, I just kind of gave up. I was distracted by other things. It wasn't a huge priority. And then later on, I remember, so after some time had passed, uh, there was another, one of these that came up, and that one wasn't even initially listed on eBay. I think I had, found some other Walt Disney Classics collection piece, and I was interested, and I talked to the seller. And I said, "Do you happen to have a Mulan and Fazo?" And they said yes, but they weren't willing to deal off eBay for it. And when the listing finally came up, they actually gave me first offer of refusal because they said, "Well, you were interested, so before I listed, do you want to have a chance to buy it?" And I asked them for the price, and they said, it was like 1,000 to 1,100. And at that time, we're all gonna laugh now, of course, but at that time, I felt that was just unacceptable. I was like, "Oh, that's just way too expensive." I had bought it earlier for like 800 and change. I didn't want to pay an extra 300-400 when all is said and done with shipping, so I passed. And so I passed on that one. And of course, that the rest is history, because as time passed, this piece's value just began to just skyrocket. It's one of the most sought after pieces in the entire line. Very, very high, high money, and it doesn't come up. Like, I think it comes up on eBay once every couple of years. There's one, by the way, right now on eBay, and it's like $4,500 and buy it, or best offer. I don't know what offer. I mean, like, if they're saying $4,500 or best offer, I got news for you. You're not going to get this thing with like a $2,000 offer. Okay. I mean, the person's obviously looking for something in the neighborhood of, I would guess, 4,000, maybe a little bit less. Now, granted, it's this statue and another Mulan statue together, but most of the value is obviously going to be with this one. And so at that point, I just couldn't find it. Couldn't find it on eBay. I was trying to tracking things down, going for leads, and it just got to the point where it seems almost like anybody, who was able to acquire one of these in the last, I would say, 5 years, it's like every single instance was basically like an epic story. I mean, there was one lady who, stumbled across a guy. I mean, this lady was a member of the Facebook forums, the Kabuto's Facebook group. And, she was lucky enough, I guess, to live near some huge Disney collector, near enough that she would actually like go visit and just check out stuff. And she asked him whether he had this, and he said, "No, I don't." And then apparently one day she went over there and it was just sitting out there. And she was like, "I thought you said you didn't have it." And he was like, "Oh, I guess I did." Like, this guy has so much stuff apparently that he obviously couldn't keep track of what he had, what he didn't have in terms of in the warehouse and green boxes. And she made him an offer, and he just was like, "Fine." He shrugged, and so she just took it. It's like crazy stuff like that, that essentially like getting, it's like lightning in a bottle type stuff, where you get these, or you have to pay through the nose. And so for me, after all this time, I really wanted to get it. I mean, not only because I'm like I mentioned with my previous video with the Triton and Ariel, because like I'm a dad with two younger daughters. So pieces like this, I love Disney, and pieces like this really speak to me. I'm very nostalgic for them. So I really wanted that father and daughter moment, especially from Mulan, and me being Chinese, and this being, of course, Chinese. Chinese legend, one of the most beloved, Chinese legends. So I really wanted it. So basically, an opportunity came along to get her, but it was from like a private dealer in Michigan, and the asking price at that point was, I hope you're sitting down for this, it was like 3,500. I think it was like 3,500 and change. What was it last? I don't remember. It was above 3. I'll say that right now. It was well above 3. And this was the same gentleman who has sold me, the grandma, and he had given me like actually pretty reasonable price. I mean, it wasn't price gouging. It was actually very reasonable. I think it was like in the neighborhood of 600 to 700. It wasn't bad at all. Of course, she's taken off since then. She's now in the $2,000 range. But so when he first said that price, I was completely floored. Remember, this is from a guy who I didn't want to pay even 1,000 for this, and I was just so sick that this is what the situation had turned into for this piece. And I was just like, you know what? I guess I'm never gonna own this piece. It's just too much. So there wasn't really even any negotiating. Like a lot of people were, if you can believe this, a lot of people were dying to pay him the 33,000, 3,500. I don't even know what the hell it is. I think it was like 3,500. They were dying to pay the 3,500, and he did, confide that it was, it was just crazy. So I passed. He sold it, and that was it. And I was just searching eBay, just kind of hoping against hope that I was going to get lucky, and nothing was happening. It's like, the months roll by. But I wasn't like, super obsessed about it. I was checking every day, but I would just check every once in a while. Nothing. And then finally on the Facebook groups, this same dealer actually, made a post on the Facebook forums just kind of mentioning that, hey, he had some really, really nice pieces come in. And lo and behold, Fato and Mulan came up again. So I contacted him again. I was like, hey, I was hoping actually for maybe a better price, because the guy does work on consignment, I think. And so what happens is he doesn't own these pieces. He sells them for people, right? And so he takes his cut. So it's not like, this guy is charging like, I don't know, 3,000 something, and the person he's, consigning for this Zhou only wanted like 600-700. I mean, obviously that person, also wants a certain amount. But I was hoping that maybe to get lucky, and maybe this is a second, Fato and Mulan, and it would be a little bit cheaper. Maybe the seller would be a little bit more reasonable. But no, it was the same exact damn price, 3,500. And actually, at that point, the dealer basically let it slip that this was the very same piece that I had passed on. And then I guess the guy who bought it from him, right, he apparently, right, very shortly after, buying the piece and getting it, something happened. I didn't pry, but apparently it was a pretty bad thing. It was like an emergency. And so he had to essentially not only sell this piece back to the dealer, but he kind of liquidated a large part of his collection to raise money very quickly. So this was unfortunate, very unfortunate set of circumstances for that person. I hope that he's okay, or that things worked out. But if you can imagine that, that this piece then was shipped from Michigan, had to be shipped back to Michigan. And so, here we were, and I had essentially a second opportunity to get it when it was lost to me. And at the time, he had already had multiple offers again to buy this piece. But this time, the difference was that these were people from, guess what? From Asia, right? And the dealer just wasn't super happy about sending it across internationally because number one, obviously the shipping would have been very, very expensive. And I don't know if the person who's willing to pay so much was willing to pay for expedited shipping through a courier service like, Federal Express or UPS, because that would, of course, jack up the price astronomically. I don't know if they were willing to pay that, because if they're not, then you're, obviously paying for much longer travel time, much longer handling time. The risk of breakage goes way up. And if there is a break, insurance, kind of like claim internationally is a crapshoot. So this was risky and dangerous, and the dealer was not really enthusiastic about it. And so he and I talked it out, and I think he gave me a little break. I don't, he gave me maybe a 100 or so, maybe a couple hundred break here or there. But this is a long time ago. It was like a couple years ago. Or what he did was he allowed me to pay it in 2 installments. And so I think that was what the plan was. And so, I decided after all of this drama, all of this heartbreak, all of this like close calls and nonsense, that it was maybe the universe telling me, well, this is your second chance, right? And so I let it pass the first time, and the second time I had gotten maybe a little bit, did some soul searching, deciding how badly do I want this piece. So many years, so many close calls, right? So I went for it. So, I split up the payment, and, he and I had done a lot of business before in the past. And so he gave me the time, and I paid it. and then he shipped it. And let me tell you, I must have lost a year off my life waiting for this to ship and get to me in one piece. It was double boxed, but this was, packed by a dealer who knew exactly what he was doing. He had already packed it well enough to make it obviously to the first seller. That guy didn't even open it. It went to him and it went right back to the dealer. And just agony waiting for it. We actually sent it priority mail. So from priority mail from Michigan to me in Southern California was like basically less than 2 days. It was really, really fast. And that's important because the faster it gets here, the less handling there is, the less chance of impact. They handle things a little bit gentler, when it's like overnight or 2 to 3 day priority mail. And so it got to me, and I'm like shaking fingers, shaking hands, and I finally unpacked her, and I finally, got her, him and her, and there was no breakage, there was no damage or anything like that. So that is like the saga of how long, the years I spent trying to find this piece, actually holding it in my hand, and then having to give it back because of the damage, and then finally getting it again when there was no chance. And just, of course, a lot of collectors regret. I'm fond of saying you win some, you lose some, but I mean, I could have had her for less than 800 if I just, basically asked for less reimbursement, I guess, and just had her repaired. I could have had her for 1,000. And I thought it was too much at that time, and so those mistakes cost me an extra 2,500 because now I had to pay through the nose all these years later. But again, you win some, you lose some, as they say. And in this case, I finally, got her. So what makes this piece so special? Well, obviously to me, you already know, I told you already, this is a father-daughter moment. There's only 2 like it in the entire line. This is, of course, Chinese. And it depicts such a tender moment between the two of them, this is like this scene at the end of the movie was like a tearjerker. She's sort of sitting there not knowing what to say, kind of being a little bit, kind of apologizing for everything she'd done, and for him to, to love her, forgive her, and to let her know how much he loves her, and the support and the patience of that. And such a beautiful, quiet scene where they're talking under the cherry blossoms. It's just, my favorite part of the movie, really. And as usual, they captured it so beautifully. So Kent Melton, who is the sculptor of this piece, deserves so much credit for, bringing everything to life. Look at the facial expression of Fazo. Look at the expression, like that sort of, diffident side glance that, she has to him. The way she's, tugging and pulling at her hair, that little, the little nervous tick she has. And then, of course, sitting next to him, and then him with his cane. Just such a amazing moment, captured in porcelain form right out of the movie. And then, of course, the accent to this is the beautiful cherry blossoms of the tree behind them. And you can see sort of the bench, just overall, so beautiful. As I've been talking, of course, I've been moving it around and showing you. So this is the grass. You can see the little cherry blossom petals interspersed on the ground. Their robes. And then, for her, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see over here, she has a little cherry blossom that just kind of landed on her, on her hair as well, right? So there you go. And I can see with the light, as I'm rotating, a little bit of the green as well. So hopefully you can see all of that. So there you go, moving it back. All those branches. So this is all porcelain. Plussing information wasn't available, but this part here, right here, this is not porcelain. You can tell by the way it sounds. Versus here, right? Listen, that's porcelain. This is not porcelain. I can tell too because I remember when this thing came broken, I could see the breaks, and that wasn't porcelain. So I believe this is resin, actually. The tree though does sound like it is porcelain if you listen to it. So I don't know. I'm not sure what the tree is made out of. I want to say it's actually resin, and that it's mainly sort of the base, and Fazio, that's actually porcelain, but I can't tell. But I think that that's actually what it is, because it's too hard to make these branches out of porcelain, in my opinion. So you can clearly see that the two of them are fine art porcelain. There it is. I'm trying to just show all the different details. So beautiful. She came kind of dusty. I used makeup brushes to just kind of powder and dust them. So hopefully that worked out. So a couple of things, right? Again, this is like one of my favorite Walt Disney Classics collection pieces, for a lot of reasons that I've just talked about. But it's far from perfect, and I think the problem here is that for all of the madness of Disney at the time, when they were just being, just trying to create so many crazy pieces, even they had to basically draw the line at the cherry blossom. So you can see all the different cherry blossom leaves, and they just couldn't do it. They couldn't do it in the way that they really wanted to. And I do feel like, while the overall picture is beautiful, and if you admire it from this distance, it's wonderful. When you get really close, the actual cherry blossoms, they do leave quite a bit to be desired, right? It looks very like unrealistic. It looks very, very blobby, right? And again, I think that there's just a limit to how they're going to be able to depict that. So there's that. We can, I think it looks best from basically this distance, in my opinion, right? And too close, and yeah, it's not the greatest. Another thing is that there's a lot of different versions of this. Not a lot of different versions. I don't want to say that, but they're not all exactly alike. There are Mulan and Fazos where this branch is a lot higher up. And as you can see for mine, and I've seen others, it's really close to her head. Like there's this little tiny gap right there. And then over here, if you look, it's like basically a millimeter. There's like a millimeter gap over here. And that's another thing I wonder about, whether it's because of the resin branches, because over time, the resin may just slowly bend, just depending on where you live, and the temperature and humidity may be over time, because of the weight of these resin pieces, slowly, the pressure forces the branches down a little bit. I can't tell. I mean, obviously this was released in 2008, which means it's been now getting on to 15 years since this piece has been in the hands of collectors. Or it could just be that, when they make these pieces, it's all a little bit different, and it has to be hand assembled in Thailand. And so it could very well be that certain pieces, when they assembled it, the branches just happen to be a little bit lower. So that's one thing to sort of look out for. I looked to see, maybe like this was a repaired piece. Now, I did talk to the dealer, of course, to make sure of this, because I paid top dollar for it. And, I trust him. He's very, he has a lot of integrity. And he assured me that, even though he wasn't the original owner, that this piece had never, ever been broken and never, ever been repaired. And again, I believe him as far as, he states. But I looked very closely just to see if, I could see any areas of potential repair. And I mean, I didn't really. I mean, there's little touches of glisten that might be glue, but that's like something that could be at the factory level, where they're just basically putting this together. Again, these branches are not just, created, from one mold. I mean, there are multiple parts that have to be molded and cast, whether in resin or porcelain, and painted and fired in the kiln. And then somebody has to then physically slowly put it together. And the areas where there might be potential repair or whatever wouldn't explain the lower, the lower angle of this particular branch right here. And so after doing just a lot of research and seeing a lot of pictures, the only conclusion I can come with is that as this is not a problem unique to me, that this is just one of those things where they just put it together a different way, and some branches will just give her more clearance and others don't. I've certainly gone over this with a fine-tooth comb, especially the branches of the tree, and I haven't found any areas that look like they're breaks. And this is from somebody who actually got a broken one. And so there you go. Because obviously, this area here is low, and so how to fix this would be to raise it up. And I don't really see how to do that without changing this, because this is the proper position. And so you would have to, target these areas. And again, this area here, from here to here, looks absolutely perfect. It looks like it hasn't ever been touched. So where would you go to try to, again, increase it? It's hard to say. I guess you could try heating it up, but I obviously don't want to do that for something this expensive. But I don't think that will work, because I'm still wondering whether this tree is actually porcelain. Because if you look at the bottom, certainly this part is porcelain. And I wonder if a lot of this was porcelain as well. If it's porcelain, you can't bend or heat it at all, So there you go. But in any case, that's a little bit more lore, a little bit more information, okay, about this piece. Again, there's only 500 of them. Mine is number 265 out of 500. There's one on eBay right now. There's another one I know that's tantalizingly close. That one is actually in Cerritos. And the reason I know that is because that person was selling Grandma Fa, and he was selling it for like an astronomical price. I don't think it ever sold. He was trying to sell it for like 2,700. And I inquired whether they had, Fa Zhou and Mulan. He said he did, but he wasn't selling it. Which, again, that would have been something, right? Because Cerritos is less than an hour from me. I could literally drive there and pick it up. So that's quite an opportunity lost. And I to this day, I don't think he ever put it up for auction. So there are those out there, but not many. And I can tell you that quite a few of the original 500, I'm guessing quite a few have breaks, was broken and gone. Me alone, I have one, that I know for a fact was broken and destroyed, probably by UPS. So very, very, very rare piece, when it's all said and done. And I'm just really, really happy to have it. And so now I have this one and the aforementioned, Good Morning Daddy with Triton and Ariel. And I'll put one more video of the two of them side by side so you can kind of see, the two father-daughter moments. But yeah, that's what I have to say about, When It Blooms Will Be the Most Beautiful of All, with Fa Zhou and Mulan sharing, this quiet, beautiful moment under the cherry blossom trees. It's definitely one of my favorite pieces, and I just feel really, really fortunate to finally have it in my collection after everything. So hope you enjoyed this review, and until next time, do take care.